This broadcast is the property of Codependence Anonymous. Reproduction without written permission from Codependence Anonymous is not permitted.
I'm going to say the we version. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. I'm going to begin by taking one moment to just read the overview and the agenda for this workshop. That way, if you decide you're not in the right place and you want to move on to another workshop, you can do that in a timely way. And also, I'll give you a sense of what I hope we're going to accomplish in the next 60, 70 minutes. So, and I'm reading the overview that many of you may have seen. So in our increasingly global community, we may discover our newfound recovery conflicts with either our own native culture or adopted culture abroad, creating, contributing, or amplifying codependent patterns with major impact. As a first-generation American of Italian parents who migrated here later in life, and a sponsor to internationals, I've observed this firsthand. My own recovery journey has helped me to identify, assess, and overcome cultural expectations that were both in conflict with American society and with the healthy and loving relationships I desire. This workshop seeks to help people identify, address, and navigate the potential pitfalls of cultural codependency using CoDA steps and traditions. And those of you who are not aware, who have not accessed the handouts yet, the handouts are available in the chat, and we will be working with them. So my game plan today is I'm going to give you a little bit of my background and my recovery journey, and then we're going to work through the handout independently for a few minutes. Then I'm switching the agenda that may be on paper just a little bit because I have some flexibility with greater time that I hadn't expected. We're going to review the tools, and we're going to have an opportunity for some open sharing and discussion, which, may be a challenge with this large of a group, but we're going to do our best. And also question and answer. And then we're going to wrap it up with a prayer, and that'll be that. Because we are, I want to respect the timeline. I am going to refer to my script, which I normally speak spontaneously, but because we're on a schedule and we're a little delayed getting started, I'm going to be reading a script a little bit, again, just to keep us on task. So I'm so very glad that you're here. I'm so very glad that I'm here. And I'm so very grateful to CoDA for my recovery. My life would have been dramatically different had I not found CoDA 12 years ago. Again, my CoDA sober date is January 1st, 2009. And I'll mention that my AA sobriety date is July 8th, 2001. So I'll have 20 years of sobriety from alcohol. And it took me a full 7 years to finally get miserable enough to find CoDA. And as I said before, I like to mention this because in CoDA recovery, I've come to believe that while I qualify for AA, and I really do, and I'm active in AA as well, I drank over my codependence and my misery. And I'm so grateful. I do have a sponsor who I've had for the duration. My sponsor happens to be in both programs. I have worked the steps in both programs multiple times, and I do sponsor. I mention this because I believe that all of those things are elements of healthy recovery. So, as I said, as a first-generation American of Italian parents who migrated to the United States later in life, they were both in their 30s, I've seen how our cultural backgrounds can be at odds with healthy recovery. My mom was schizophrenic and my dad was alcoholic. My mom also self-medicated with drugs at different times. Nonetheless, they were both extremely well educated. They both had doctorate degrees. They were both very overachieving. And they were also very status oriented in a way that I believe is very sort of a particular way that I have found is prevalent in Europe. Okay. And it may be in other countries. But it's certainly different than in the United States. I mean, not that we aren't status oriented here too, but it can be, I think in Europe, there's a particular quality of it. My mom abandoned her career. Like I said, she had a doctorate, a brilliant woman. She abandoned her career before it even began, really, at the insistence of my father, who from Southern Italy, he was from Southern Italy, and he had the cultural expectation that she submit to him and that she subordinate all that she was in the interest of the family and of him primarily because, he built his career partly on her. And I believe that contributed to her excessive, naturally it would, her dependence on him and on me. Because I stepped into a void because my father was very preoccupied with his career. He was a college professor. He came to the United States on a postdoctoral fellowship and was very consumed with that. And I was born, my older brother was also born in Italy and he came here and then they moved to Southern California and I was born and they were still thinking they were going back to Italy. So my mother still wasn't really speaking English fluently. And really from an early age, she was depending on me. I mean, even in infancy, also because she relied on me for translation quite a bit. So this was the building blocks for a very dysfunctional family. And I believe also contributed to the eventual psychological crisis, which she experienced, and all of the devastating collateral impacts because, she was diagnosed as a schizophrenic, but she really didn't have her first episode until after my younger brother was born and I was 5 years old, the first time that she was hospitalized long-term. And her patterns really greatly influenced my own patterns. And I didn't even realize how much. First, in my own caregiving relationship to her from an early age, my relationship to my brothers, which was also very culturally driven because in my family and in certain dimensions of Italian culture, the male sons are golden. And the women take a servile role to support and protect and glorify the males in the family. And then later, this also played out in my relationships with men and eventually my husband. And I will tell you, well, I'll wait to tell you. Ironically, my own childhood religion did not play a significant role in contributing to my patterns, okay? My mom never adopted American religious practices because of the language barrier. But interestingly, I had a conversion experience 20 years ago, and my early, well, more than early, for many years, my own religion that I found after my conversion experience contributed to these patterns of, female submission, self-sacrifice, self-criticism. And I had to work through all of that in recovery too. I also found that the disconnect with my family culture with American culture amplified the problem. For instance, women being servile and being submissive to men and isn't nearly as common in America. And so that seemed to make it worse for me and to deepen and magnify my shame, my feelings of shame and my isolation from other women. And it was a pattern that I had difficulty overcoming, partly because of this. So my own recovery journey has helped me to identify and assess and overcome these cultural expectations that were both in conflict with American society and also in conflict with recovery. And more is constantly being revealed. The big development for me is that I got divorced last November. My divorce was final in November 2020 after 17 years of marriage to a man who I married in the throes of codependency. I wasn't in love with him. I didn't even desire him. We weren't really suited to each other. We weren't equals. And yet I married him and remained married for 17 years, really absolutely every single day, filled with shame. And I mean, I was able to make the most of it. And for the time that I was in the marriage, but that was also a focus of my journey. So, and it's been an extremely liberating process. And these struggles that I've been through and my coming to CoDA, I came really triggered by my mom because my mom was living with me at the time. And of course, I discovered that the problem wasn't my mom. The problem wasn't my husband. The problem wasn't all of those relationships around me. The problem was me. I was the common denominator. And so if I was going to have relief and be happy and joyous and free and experience what CoDA promises, I had to work on me. So what I'm going to do is we're going to begin with the self-assessment, which is this document that many of you should have. And you'll see it looks like a worksheet with columns. And we're going to begin by assessing common cultural codependency patterns. All right. And please let me know when you have it so that we can review it together before you take the time to work through it. It's actually the next slide down, if you wouldn't mind.
I'm working on it.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for doing that. This would be so much harder if I was trying to do both at the same time.
There. Is that better?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I want to give you a moment for those of you who would like to access it so that you can work with it yourselves. If I can get a thumbs up that you have it in front of you and you're ready to review it together, that would be great. And I'm actually trying to do this on two machines so I can see the chat.
So just an FYI, if you scroll up, I sent it as a file in Portuguese and English. Scroll up in the chat, that is. You'll see some files. Click on them and they should open for you. Okay.
Okay. Does everybody have access to the file now? And we'll walk through it, and you can do this at another time. Oh, wonderful.
Great.
Thank you, Roman. And thank you. Let me just take a minute to thank the translators that are here, which is so important to this workshop. I don't know that I had translators at the last workshop where I presented this. You should be able to either click it and then right click on it to download it. If you have Microsoft Word, you could even open it on your machine and just be listening to me while you type into the document. I'll give you another minute.
Okay. English is up. English, Portuguese, and Russian. It's great. Thanks so much.
That's awesome. Okay, super. So what I've done is I've basically just copied the CoDA patterns and characteristics, as you'll see in the column that says pattern. And then what I'm asking you to do, and I also left it, you'll see each section, there's other patterns that there's blanks for you to enter other patterns that you've observed, okay? So for instance, under denial patterns, I have letters A through I are the patterns from CoDA, but there may be some other patterns that you have found, other denial patterns, and each section will have space for you to enter patterns of your own that you have observed seem to be codependency patterns that you've struggled with that maybe are unique to your culture. Then you'll see there's a column 1, all right, is the degree to which this pattern is a prized, meaning a very good thing, or accepted cultural value or trait in your country or religion of origin, okay? Where the number 10, you rate them from 1 to 10, where 10 is the greatest. Yes?
Back up.
Where 10 is very valued. So in column number 1, and I'm just gonna review it and then we're gonna take a few minutes to do it. So for instance, what I referred to in my own experience with my mother in Southern Italian culture, that, being submissive, being a submissive wife, in fact, even vanishing in relationship to your husband and your children is a prized value, or it was then. I mean, it's shifted over the years since, but it was, okay? And notice that I said your country or your religion, okay? And it may be, for instance, in my early religion, that was also a prized value there. So maybe you're not here because of your culture in terms of geography, but in terms of your religious culture, or it might even be your family's culture for whatever reason. So it may not be that you're from a different country. Okay, and then in column, so you're going to take a few minutes to rank those from 1 to 10. And then in column 2, you're going to rank again the degree to which this pattern has been the most challenging for you.
My issue is I get very laser focused on things.
Could people please mute themselves? I'm sorry, I don't have that capability. They're
in your adopted culture. So before we get started, I'm going to give you time to complete this. And the other thing is I would tell you, just don't judge, don't overthink it, just put the number, okay? So before I get started though, I want to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have at this point. And then I'm going to give you a few minutes to go ahead and complete the self-assessment. If you have questions, just raise your hand. You can raise your hand by going into the participants, and then you'll see an icon for raising your hand. Is it you touch your name? Yeah. No, not touch your name. What is it? Carol? How do we have it set up
Reactions.
for people to raise their hands? Okay, I see questions.
Reaction.
There's some people asking for the handout again in the chat. I was trying to find it. I couldn't find it.
Okay, Suzanne, how can I help you? I see your hand is raised. Would you like to unmute and ask? All right. Okay, Suzanne, do you have a question?
Yes. Can you resend out that agenda, the first part that you sent out? Because I have the checklist, but that agenda sheet that you talked about at the beginning.
Sure. It doesn't, I mean, I'm sure we can repost it or something, right, Carol? I'm just not sure. It doesn't contain anything vital to what we're doing today. It just sort of lays out a plan.
I would say
that's
that one's not a handout, but the handouts I am trying to post. And I'll, if you cannot scroll up and click on the version that you want, because it's Portuguese, English, and Russian, I'm going to repost as much as I can. If somebody else just reposted, so
okay.
try that.
Okay. Yes, Genevieve, how can I help you?
I'd like you to clarify what you mean by in your adopted culture.
Okay.
So you're talking about your history, but then do I have an adopted culture? What does it mean?
Okay. So, for me personally, I'll use my example for me that, I grew up in a very traditionally Southern Italian family of a particular, and we certainly had dysfunction that completely transcended culture, it had nothing to do with culture. But the culture itself magnified codependency. And then coming to the United States, it was even further magnified because it was at odds with the culture around me. And it may not be, I have a sponsee who lives in a Northern European culture, which is dramatically different than Italian culture. And she lives in a culture where women are much more liberated, so much so that her desire to stay home with her children is not accepted, or it's criticized, or it's questioned, which is magnifying her own struggle with her codependency and her recovery. Is that helping to make sense of it? And again, it may not have anything to do. Yes?
I was wondering if you're also referring to CoDA as recovery as a culture. We're all in the program. Is that a form of living? It is.
It is. And actually, you know what? That's a great observation, Genevieve, because, you can be living, and we are living by a set of spiritual principles that are at odds a lot with maybe our community outside of CoDA. So that's a perfectly legitimate view too. So I guess I would say, interpret it as in the way that is most meaningful to you, or where you see the disconnect is the bigger problem for you.
Thank you.
Sure. Did anybody have any other questions? What I'm going to do is I'm going to set the timer and give you, 15 minutes to complete this. And in the meantime, if anybody else, Stacy, has questions, you guys just go ahead and get started on completing the self-assessment, because we're going to talk about it and share with one another. And in the meantime, I will also answer questions. And actually, you know what? Let me just take 1 minute and finish completing the next section. After you've completed the patterns checklist where you're ranking them, on page 4, yes, this is important because this is going to make it more doable for us to discuss it. On page 4, you're going to see, are you guys seeing me hold this up? Okay, on page 4, you're going to see that there's a space where you're going to go back and circle the 3 with the highest scores in each column. So note your top 3. And if you have ties, list each one. Or the top 3 could be subjective. Maybe you know, whatever you think are the 3 most greatest disconnects that cause you the most grief, that have been more of a struggle for you, that are rooted in culture. Okay. And then finally, the next page, we're going to see how they've shown up in your life and how they have negatively affected you. That's on page 5, letter C. So you're going to use those 3 to use how the specific examples of how they've shown up. And then after we've done that piece, we're going to talk together about some tools that we're going to draw from the workbook to help us to cope with these patterns more effectively now that we've gained some new awareness of them. All right. So anyway, you've got your marching orders. I hope you're going to take the time to do this. And then worst case scenario, you can take out one of your pieces of CoDA literature and just use the patterns and characteristics from the workbook or some other piece of literature and just do this exercise on your own without using the tool that I provided. Did anybody else have any questions? Yes, Irina. Hi, Irina. Welcome.
Hi, hello. Thank you for holding this seminar. It's actually my first Zoom meeting. I'll get straight to my question. Can you hear me?
Wonderful. Yes, I can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Excellent. On point B of the exercise where we're going back and choosing 3 of the highest score, does in comparing the 2 columns in between each other or choosing highest score for what we rate traits that we identify from our culture of origin and highest 3 from the culture that we're adapting to, or the one that we switched to, so to speak, the environment, the newer environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was thinking when I devised this, I was thinking column 2, because I'm thinking that is the thing that causes you the most pain or the most struggle. But if you find interpreting it in another way is more effective for you, that's great.
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying that.
And I actually cannot set the timer because I'm using my phone. So let me think. Do I have another timer somewhere?
Yeah, I can do that. What are you asking for?
Could you set the timer for 12 minutes?
Okay.
Thank you so much. You're a blessing.
I'm here for it.
And, the other thing that we can do for you folks is, Carol, correct me if I'm wrong, but if people still struggle to get the documents, can we post them somewhere for people to get at least after the program today?
So they were sent to all the registrants. That was before if you're last minute, then maybe not. But they can be sent at the end again, and they might get posted. I'm not sure on the website. But I'm not sure, and maybe they'll be uploaded with the recordings at the same time. So there's options that'll come, but not at this moment. And if I leave the screen share, then I'm not screen sharing. So I apologize for that.
And, I neglected to say it, but it's never too late. I'm a big believer in the power of prayer. So if you're stuck, if you feel stuck, just ask your higher power to reveal, to bring to the surface the things that it would like to free you from. Because I really do believe that awareness is the gateway to freedom. So, and that our higher power wants us to be free. And so if you can become aware of these patterns and how they may have been distorted by your culture or magnified by your culture, or, disconnect with your new culture, either way, whatever the case, that, you can pray for help with that. Carol, thank you so much for everything you're doing. And you're an example of recovery, that you're so serene despite the little bit of a bump there at the start.
It's okay. So and so are you, Isabella, but I'm going to just let me know. I've already started the timer, but if you want me to restart, I'm not sure.
No, that's fine. Yeah. And if people have questions while they're doing the work, please don't hesitate. I'm going to go warm my coffee and I shall return. Okay.
Oh, we're just working on the first page, just for clarity, because I was doing all these other things.
No, so, you're working on the whole thing.
So is it helpful to have this page that's up there right now, or a different page? This is the page one pattern.
Go ahead and move to the next page now.
Okay.
And then maybe do every page. That's a great idea. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because those who don't have access, they could theoretically at least jot down a little note and do it on a piece of paper.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, okay. I'll just every 2 minutes or something. And if at the end, if they need more, I'll go back to a page that they put in the chat.
That's Thanks. So very thoughtful of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I offer you a cup of coffee, but we can't do that.
Isabel? Oh. Hi. Isabel, can you kindly give an example? As I'm having a hard time with the what's that rate? The 1 to 10, the degree in which it's acceptable, and then the other one, how it's challenging as to like rating, like if for example, like in having difficulty identifying what they are feeling, if that is what is the acceptable norm, is that what it means? Then you rank it, and you're on mute. You're on mute as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's pick the one you picked. Where are you?
It was the denial patterns.
Okay.
It's the very first one.
Okay. So in certain cultures, and certainly probably not Italian culture, I must say.
Yeah, in Asian culture, pretty much.
But and say, okay, and I don't want to stereotype, but
No.
understanding,
yeah.
in Asian culture, that it's not appropriate to express or identify one's feelings, right?
Yeah.
So in Asian culture, that's highly valued. Like your ability to maybe be in, and there are many other cultures that are like that, to be composed and never to reveal any feeling or whatever is highly prized. So maybe you'd give it a 10.
I see.
Okay.
And then versus.
But then when you come to America, like I used to have a colleague who was Chinese. And then when she came to America and she had her children in America, her children were not in that culture. They weren't in Chinese culture. So it caused terrible conflict with her children because they wanted to be told they were loved. They wanted to be cuddled. They wanted to laugh and play. And my friend, that was not the way she was raised, so it was a terrible disconnect for her. So that was very challenging. Is that helping you?
Yes. So that, let's say, for example, if I were to give it where I'm totally experienced that as a, as a daughter and a parent, a daughter of an immigrant, and then a parent of American race, as well as myself.
Right.
Both. So that would be most likely, let's say my challenge would be like a 2, something like that on the lower end. Is that, or am I going the opposite?
Well, no, I think
what would the challenge? How would I rank a challenge?
Well, it's very challenging, right? It's very challenging for you.
I see. So then that would be more of a 10, for example.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I can see the confusion there. Yeah, I understand the confusion.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope that helps.
Yes.
Joanna, may I help you? I'm sorry, just one moment.
No worries. Thank you.
Joanna, may I help you?
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm just trying to get into the other break room for like 30 minutes and nobody seems to be able to help me. And I just trying to get into the couples break room. Is there somebody?
Oh, okay. All right. I don't know what the trick is there. Let me see if I can get you in there. Can I do that for her?
No,
what's her name?
Florence.
Joanna from LA.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Vladimir and Carol, for posting those files in the chat. So for those of you who haven't been able to access the files, and we could probably, I don't know, what time is it? Because I'm just trying to, we have more time than I've been accustomed to for this.
Let me double check.
Yeah,
Florence.
and I have okay, it's 2:13 and I have until 2:40. Okay. All right. Well, we probably, as soon as this, yeah, Joanna, was somebody able to help you?
Not yet. My screen is not cooperating at the moment. So
Oh, okay. Mina, comment allez-vous?
Yes.
What can we do for you?
Thank you. Thank you, Isabella. I am Italian too. Yes, from South.
Are you named after the famous Mina, the singer?
Yes. I live in France, but my parents were both Italian. That's when I am in France. I have to. I separate myself in two parts. When I am at home, I am Italian, and when I am outdoors of my home, I am like a immigrant French.
Interesting.
Yes, that's my Italian language were Slag. And we speak Italian at home, and education was very strict and submit to mail. And outdoor, I was like a pretty girl with freedom. But it was not compatible between home and outdoor. That's why it is very difficult to manage these two parts of lives.
Yes. Well, Mina, thank you so much for sharing that. And actually, and I hope, are you completing the handout?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because after we do the handout, we are going to have an opportunity to talk about maybe what tools can help, and we can each share our own experience and how we've coped with that. So if you have some skills that you have developed or how you have reconciled that, I'm sure other people would love to hear about it. And we're going to share those things in a traditional meeting format. So if you can hold on to that for a minute, we'd love to hear more. I just want to give people a few minutes to complete the handout. Thank you for sharing that, though. How are we doing on time, Carol?
Yeah, so we're good. Your 12 minutes have gone by.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so has everybody? Can you guys, if you are, I guess I don't see faces. Why don't I see faces? I'd like to see
you're
by
sharing your screen, and they're probably pushed over to the side.
Yeah, well, and I'm on my phone too, but I can see some faces.
I'm screen sharing, and you can maybe in the top right-hand corner, you can make a selection of how you want to.
Actually, and I've figured it out here, so I can do it on my other. Lana, hi. I just saw that you were there. It's nice to see you. Hi. Okay. So did everybody work through that or get pretty far through it so we can talk a little bit about getting into the solution? I would like to take 10 minutes, and if we can set 2:17. Oh, we're running out of time in a hurry, aren't we?
Oh, people but they always close pushed anyway.
Okay. Well, I'd like to take 10 minutes if we could, Carol. I'd like people to have an opportunity to share if they gained any insight, like one revelation about something that they realize is a cultural disconnect or cultural codependency. Can we do that? Would you mind setting the timer for 10 minutes? And if somebody would like to raise their hand, like Mina shared, share how, without crosstalk, please. If we could refrain from crosstalk, that would be great. So if you could just share in I statements how this exercise, even if you haven't completed it, if you realized a disconnect or an area of cultural codependency, if you would like to raise your hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Isabella, do you want a 1 minute share per person or 2 minutes?
That's a good idea. 1 minute share. That's a great idea. Thank you, Carol.
1 minute share means 10 people can raise their hands, first 10.
Okay. So first 10 people. Sky, I see quite a few hands. Great. Sky, would you like to kick us off and share in a minute or less?
Yes. So my first challenge to this cultural comparison was that I have no culture to compare to. So what I did was I adjusted, I adjusted it to reflect my family culture, my family of origin culture.
Excellent. That's perfectly legitimate.
And then I put the column 2 to be my adult life.
All right. Very good.
And
Perfect.
so what I did was I went through, and it's amazing how it's either matched, 10 for 10, or it's the exact flip.
Interesting. Like for what? I'm sorry, I'm cross-talking, but I'm curious.
Okay.
Let's hear it. Well, maybe we can have open discussion. Go ahead. I'm sure other people have the same question.
For example, in my family of origin, lack of empathy for feelings and needs of others was discouraged. It was not prized. In adult life, it is. It's not the lack of empathy or feelings for the needs of others, but okay. It's just that it's more important.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a great insight. That's an excellent insight. And again, that's a perfectly legitimate mode, is to use it as your family culture being at odds with adulthood or healthy recovery.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Kimberly?
Hi, thank you so much. This is so helpful. What I did, mine was similar to what Sky said, is like I did my family and then I did my marriage, which is a mixed race marriage. And what I had a little difficulty with is like a lot of the actual what was valuable in the culture of both of them was very different than the behavior. And so yeah, so it's just how much are we in integrity with what we really believe to be true, which is just really interesting. And I would say the thing that was the most strikingly different was the suppression of feelings in my family about the ability to identify feelings or the what happened if you did share your feelings was actually not safe, in my family. And that is absolutely not true in my marriage. Now, how we deal with our feelings, not so great sometimes, but at least we're expressing, and we do not feel suppressed in feeling our feelings.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so it's managing that, because that can be destructive too, and that's what I'm learning in CoDA, is how to take a breath and step back when I'm just like feeling really pissed off, instead of saying
That's
something.
1 minute.
Okay, thanks. I'm done.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure a lot of people can identify. Marcello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, just to explain, my name is Marcelo, but I'm from Brazil. My origin is Japanese. It's similar because
wow.
It's trying to Japanese with Italian names. It's because
wow.
Because some have a Brazilian name. But for my culture, it's so close. It's different. For example, the Italian, there's much Italians descended here in Brazil. They are more open, and I born in close to the avoidance of relationship is by my main pattern. And it's how one thing leads to the other, because there is a lot of criticism. It's very common, the criticism that you have to I raised with this pattern. Oh, you are not enough. Then you are not enough. avoid relationships. It's how one pattern leads to the other. Is to it's avoidance and there's a clash because Brazilian and even the Italian are too much to very close, have a relationship with others, and for me it's avoidance. Of course with CoDA I get better, but I have to still fight with the avoidance. Thank you very much. Grazie.
Oh, that's great. Prego. Irina. And forgive me if I mispronounce anybody's name, but thank you, Marcelo.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for providing this. This is quite an eye-opening exercise. And I'm so glad I came here because this applies very much to me. I'm Romanian. That's the culture that I grew up in. And I think we're a little bit of cousins with Italians, so there's going to be a lot of parallels there. And I drew the parallel in between my culture of origin and the North American culture, and I'm familiar with this more in a work relationship setting, so to speak. And I was thinking about the way people communicate with each other, especially in conflict situations, and Romanians are pretty much very expressive with their emotions, quite a lot of them, and it can lead to quite openly fiery arguments even in the workplace. I would say a lot of people don't shy away from that.
The end of 1 minute.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That was very helpful. And, we may have more time to talk after this, but I want to give other people a chance. So, John?
Hi. My name is John, codependent.
Hi, John.
For a long time, I've been reciting these patterns in my meetings. And just today, during this workshop, for the first time, when before I was saying to myself, I suffer from all of these patterns. Now it's starting to shift. I suffer mostly from denial and low self-esteem patterns, followed by compliance and control. The top three are 1A, have difficulty identifying what they feel. 2, B, judge what they think, say, or do harshly as never good enough. And then 2D, value others' approval of their thinking, feelings, behavior over their own. For years, I felt it was appropriate to carry on a male, strong figure of not showing emotion, not being an emotional man. Emotion actually represented weakness to me.
Yes.
And it was only after a crisis
1 minute.
through that now I am embracing emotionalism, and I find still very constant change going on in my life. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing, John. I appreciate that. I'm sure that encouraged other people. Nicola, or is it Nicola? I'm sorry. Whatever it is. You're up next.
I'm Nicola in Los Angeles. I grew up in England. I married I came here when I was 20, and I married a Persian gentleman. And
wow.
I left him when I was 35, but my kids grew up with him. So there's this huge disconnect, and I'm really glad I attended this today. I can't tell you how grateful I am. I had no idea how deep it was. I have these continual arguments with my children where I have been learning for 20 years how to express my feelings, and they shut me down all the time and tell me that, I'm being ridiculous expressing my feelings. So this was very, very helpful and very, very revealing to realize where it's all coming from. It's coming from, in England, we weren't allowed to express feelings. I come here, and after a divorce, I learned to express my feelings. But my kids grew up with their dad, who's Persian, and they weren't allowed to express their feelings. So they don't accept me expressing my feelings. So huge arguments all the time. So I was very grateful for this exercise. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you very much. That's great to hear. I mean, awareness is the beginning of healing. You know, if you've got the awareness, it has its own weight, is what my sponsor says.
Yeah.
Because then you can see what's going on, and and we're going to talk about tools in a minute. We only have a few minutes, but Ksenia.
Hey guys. I identify as person of Soviet background who has become mostly American now. So I picked 2 patterns out of each category to kind of look at. So since I picked them, they of course scored on the higher end of register. So denial and avoidance were a mixed bag. Interesting things were low self-esteem scored higher on detriment to being in this culture versus where it was valued, although it was valued highly. Compliance was a little lower as a detriment to adapting to this culture versus my upbringing. And the favorite of the day is freely offering advice. That scored as a 10 on both sides, which is interesting because it's actually pretty prevalent in this country too, maybe like an 8, but it's still very detrimental. People don't want to hear unsolicited advice here. So that's kind of and one of my sponsees now is also an immigrant. So thank you for this wonderful tool. Not a second too soon. We'll be doing step 4 with it.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad to hear it. Thank you so much for sharing. Luz?
And this is the end of your 10 minutes that you requested, Isabella.
I'm going to let's have Luz, Jennifer, and Kevin, and then we'll call it a day.
Great.
Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Buenos dias to everyone. My name is Luz.
Hi,
I am
Luz.
Puerto Rico. Yeah, I am from Puerto Rico. I'm Puerto Rican, but I live now in California. And I understand the beauty of having the freedom to share in our groups. But I also want to mention that we have to go back to history, especially for women and people of color and oppressed people, because talking or share something, it was punished. So we used to live in a slavery and terrorist environment. So do not punish yourself or your culture because you're not speaking out. Like for me as a Puerto Rican, before I share or speak, I have to trust. So I have to build a trust in a group or a person, then I share. And that for me is safety. Thank you so much and bless you all.
Thank you, Luz. Beautiful. Thank you. Jennifer, you're up. Jennifer, did you still want to share?
You're muted.
I thought I unmuted myself. Sorry. Okay, 2 minutes now starts, or 1 or whatever. Okay. Family of origin, more Irish, Scottish, and so on, and German on the other side. So lots of control and lots of no feelings. My dad was my own high school teacher, so that led me actually by teenagerhood. All the feelings had been kept inside so much that I began to think I was a little crazy, and basically I was just reacting to the family. So I had a breakdown and I took a break out, and then I went back to university and became a teacher. So here's the thing, as a teacher, these days you have to teach children skills about how to learn to express your feelings, and the kids are learning that in school these days. So my higher power and God has given me the chance to have my friends' little girls as my adopted grandchildren, and they teach me about feelings and boundaries. Here's a picture of them. Oh, just a minute. I can't. They're just so adorable. Oh,
that's 1 minute.
They're dancers. Anyway, it was them on the phone asking if they could spend time with me, but got into a very bad romantic relationship, over the top. So that's for another day. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jennifer. I identify. Yeah, our kids are often our best teachers.
Yeah,
whether they're
thank you
ours
so
or
much.
students.
Thanks.
Kevin, you're the last guy on the list.
Wow,
No
what a privilege. I'm so grateful. I was so busy trying to get a download that I haven't actually gone through the process, but what came to me and still is just locally being in multiple programs, how whenever I walk into a different room, different 12-step program, I'm in a different culture. Even though the principles are supposedly the same, there's just a different type of way to share, or in my experience, I don't bring now my CoDA work into any of my 12-step programs, really. It does in terms I can express my feelings, but in a way which says, wow, there are really differences in all my 12-step programs that need to be respected. So that was all I had to share.
That's so interesting, Kevin. That sounds like a workshop to me. It's a very interesting subject. Time has blown by so quickly, but I did want to take a minute to talk a little bit about the solution and one resource that's available for that. And many of you, naturally, the most important resource is working the program. So whether it's with a sponsor or because sponsors in CoDA are in such short supply, just making a work group, getting the work book and the new edition of the workbook, which I don't have with me in my hands, has in the back of the work group a meeting format for a step study group. But on page 35 of the workbook is tools. So following are some tools available to us in working step 3, and these tools have been freely offered by members of CoDA in the spirit of light, love, and the hope of recovery. And what I'd like to encourage you to do as a next step, and I'm sorry that we can't spend all day talking about some of what we've unearthed with this experience, is on page 6 of the booklet. In prior versions of this workshop, we had small work groups that, groups of 8 people, but group brainstorming, useful tools and alternative ways to deal with a particular pattern in your everyday life based on our shared experience, strength, and hope. So I encourage you to connect with some other people or even on your own. Take a look at the list of tools and identify a tool that you're going to try to apply to this particular pattern that you've identified. They're going to help. Just becoming aware of a pattern is life-changing, because now you're not reacting unconsciously, and you can see where it's coming from and how you might handle it in a way that causes you less harm and possibly other people in turn. So I encourage you again, complete the exercise. Hopefully we will find a way. All of you, if you registered late, you should still be getting an email with all of the attachments and the handout, the self-assessment tool, and also complete it and find the tool that you'd like to try to apply and practice. And remember that, practicing new behavior is uncomfortable. So the fact that it's uncomfortable or even causes you anxiety doesn't mean it's bad. I always like to say, 1, face everything and recover, FEAR. And also borrowing from psychology, the way they treat phobias is to exposure equals extinction. So face your fears to be liberated from them. I'd like to close with the 7-step prayer. But after a moment of silence, so it's 2:37. We could have a minute of silence, and then I will read